Below the monastery wall, night has already settled. The path receives us inside a quiet that does not need to announce itself. The stones that held the day now return only a little coolness, and even that seems to thin into the air before it quite reaches the hand. The monastery does not appear all at once. Its wall is simply there, holding its place against the mountain night as if this hour has visited it many times before. One lamp is enough to show where the path gives a small turn. One cypress is enough to keep the darkness from feeling bare. Beyond that, very little is needed. The road does not ask to be crossed quickly, and the wall does not ask to be admired. Both allow the eye to slow down without effort, and the listener is received by a quiet that had already arranged itself before the voice arrived. At the entry arch, the threshold opens through old timber and stone, but it does not feel like a point of decision. A little warmer light stays deeper inside, not bright enough to pull, only enough to soften the inner distance. The shadow overhead calms the eye rather than deepening the scene into drama, and the passage becomes less an event than a gentle change in shelter. This is not a gate of announcement. It is a gate of quiet permission. The listener should not feel that a new chapter has begun simply because a threshold has appeared. The wall, the timber, the recessed light, and the air beyond them all belong to one uninterrupted night, and the mind passes inward as gently as the frame does. Inside, the lower courtyard keeps its paving, its basin, and its low walls in a relation that feels complete long before language arrives. The open air above does not widen the mood so much as settle it more evenly across the space. Stone, water, and one wall light are enough. Nothing else should crowd the scene. The listener should feel that the episode has broadened without accelerating. There's a subtle order here that does not need to be named in order to be felt. The paving holds the basin. The basin holds a weaker version of the lamp. The low walls hold the night air just enough to make it seem gently gathered rather than exposed. This is one of the first places where the episode should begin to feel less observed and more inhabited by stillness itself. Near the center of the court, the basin keeps a dark surface and a small return of lamplight, but even the reflection seems modest about its own existence. A little wind moves across the water without making it restless. The dim light does not sparkle. It only touches, then softens. Reflection remains weaker than stone, and because of that the scene becomes calmer the longer it is allowed to remain simple. This moment should not be filled too quickly with explanation. The listener needs only the water, the surrounding stone, and the faint lamp return to feel that the pace has lowered again. The scene becomes stronger when sentence endings soften slightly, allowing thought to loosen before the next line fully arrives. Along the cloister walk, columns and arches repeat without asking to be counted. Their order is felt more as rhythm than as architecture. The floor remains worn and even, and the spaces between one opening and the next do more of the emotional work than the structure itself. Nothing in the passage tries to distinguish itself from the rest. This is where the night should start to feel less observed and more continuously inhabited, though not by active figures or imagined movement. It is inhabited by repetition, by the calm reassurance that one arch gives way to the next with almost no pressure at all. The voice should remain close to the visible anchors and let the repetition do its own work on the listener. A small niche in the wall holds a lamp, a folded cloth, and a modest vessel of oil. The light remains practical and contained. It does not spread very far, and that containment helps the whole monastery feel human without becoming theatrical or artificially intimate. The shelf edge, the stone around it, and the quiet glow are sufficient. This scene becomes softer if the voice resists turning the niche into symbol. It should remain small, useful, and calm. The listener should feel a human nearness, only in proportion, not in narrative emphasis. The cloth has been folded. The oil waits to be used again. The light continues because it needs no explanation in order to belong. The refectory has already emptied into silence. Long tables remain in place, and a few bowls or cups sit where they no longer matter very much. The room feels fuller for having been used, but no trace of conversation remains active within it. What stays behind is not memory in any dramatic sense, only a quieter afterstate in which the space continues existing more gently than it did while occupied. The listener should not feel the urge to imagine people returning. That would reawaken the room. Instead, the scene should hold the calm fact that use has ended and rest has followed without effort. Tabletops, benches, the dim rhythm of the room, and a little darkness between them are enough to keep the monastery human without increasing pressure. At one corner of the scriptorium, a writing board, a closed ink vessel. The scene is gentler than labor. Work has already left it behind. The board remains where it was set down, the vessel remains closed, and the cloth keeps its shape without asking the room to reconstruct the activity that came before it. This is not a documentary room. It should not summarize the intellectual life of the monastery. It only offers a final trace of care, then lets the quiet continue without commentary. The smaller scale of the corner helps the episode narrow and settle without becoming intimate in a modern way. A narrow stair rises toward the upper cells, though even the upward motion feels slower than thought. The wall catches almost no light. The rail disappears a little, returns a little, then gives itself back to shadow. The climb should not register as movement toward revelation. It should feel more like the gradual removal of the last unnecessary sounds. This scene benefits from restraint. It is better to let the stair remain mostly a shape of stone, line, and darkness. What changes is not the dramatic level of the episode, but its pressure. Less remains to be said. Less remains to be marked. The monastery begins to feel as though it has several layers of quiet, each one only slightly deeper than the one before. The upper gallery overlooks the courtyard with less detail than before. Shapes below remain legible, but not complete. Distance helps them soften. Posts, shadow, and the open void of the court are enough to support the scene. The widened space should feel gentler than it did in episode 6, with even less sense of reveal, as if the night has simply thinned one layer of closeness. The voice should move with particular softness here. Larger space can accidentally make language more declarative, but this scene should do the opposite. It should widen the episode while lowering the listener further into continuity. Nothing in the gallery is there to produce grandeur. It is only a higher stillness from which the courtyard below seems to breathe more faintly than before. One small cell keeps a bedroll, a cup, and a wall recess in near-complete stillness. The room offers less than the listener expects, and that very plainness makes it easier to rest inside. Nothing needs to be enlarged emotionally. The bedroll is enough. The cup is enough. The recess in the wall is enough. The calmer the voice remains, the more complete the room becomes. This scene should not seek meaning in austerity. It should not make simplicity into a lesson. It is better to let the cell remain what it is, a modest enclosure in which the night has almost no resistance at all. There is less to track, less to hold, and therefore more room for sleepward drift. In a smaller room beyond, bundles of drying herbs hang in shadow, their forms softer than their details, their edges more important than their names. A shelf, a cord, and a faint line of leaf texture are enough to hold the frame. The room should smell imagined rather than described. It belongs to the same night without asking for any change in tone. Too much explanation here would immediately become documentary. The room does not need herb lore. It only needs the quiet suggestion of preserved usefulness, now dimmed and resting like everything else. This is one of the best places to reduce consonant pressure and let language glide more smoothly. The chapel door remains closed, with one small lamp beyond it, or beside it, enough to suggest interior quiet without turning the space into revelation. Wood grain, iron and stone threshold carry the whole scene. This is one of the places where a story might try to become significant. But significance must remain quiet if it is present at all. The listener should not be invited to anticipate what lies behind it. Anticipation would sharpen the mind at the wrong time. It is better to let the closeness of the door participate in the episode's overall release from pressure. The lamp nearby does not beckon. The threshold does not insist. The material presence of wood and stone is already enough. Near the close, the tower shadow lies across part of the courtyard and part of the wall, making the remaining light feel smaller and more tender. Architecture is still present, but its edges begin to loosen. The shadow does not darken the episode in a dramatic sense. It only lowers the final degree of visual certainty, allowing the whole monastery to feel as though it is receding a little from the need to be clearly seen. The night here should feel almost self-sustaining. The voice has less to do than before, because the monastery has already completed much of the work of quieting itself. Stone, shadow, and the last held light remain in relation, and that relation is enough to carry the listener toward the final release. At the end, one final light remains at the edge of the court, and even that seems to belong more to memory than to illumination. The paving, the wall, and the darkness between them stay softly readable. They no longer ask to be separated very clearly. Little by little, the episode has been placing less pressure on each visible thing, until only relation remains. Light beside stone, darkness beside both, air holding them together. Nothing needs to conclude itself. The voice can become lighter here, not thinner in identity, only looser in effort. It has almost finished carrying the listener. Now it only remains nearby for a few last lines. The final sentences should not feel like a closing statement. They should feel like language setting itself down inside the room that has been held open all along. The last spoken word should leave a little air behind them. After that, the courtyard should continue by itself. The light remains. The wall remains. The darkness between them remains. For a few more seconds after the final line, the ambience should keep that relation alive, so the listener is not returned too quickly to the fact of an ending.